Today, we are excited to learn from Dr. Angie Lindsay and Dr. Sherry Cow at the University of Florida. They will be presenting, Can you relate Florida ag stressors and the impact of GIS? I'm going to turn it over first to Kendra, and she can provide a more thorough introduction. And there you go.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you to all for joining us today. We're excited to present our Florida findings to you. If I can move the slides, here we go. Our objectives today are to give you an overview of how GIS has informed extension on climate-related stressors. And then secondly, we'll discuss the stressors that were shared by our stakeholders. Our first speaker today is Dr. Sherry Shao. She is a research assistant professor in the Economic Impact Analysis program of the Food and Resource Economics Department. She is interested in leveraging interdisciplinary technologies, GIS, data science, and informatics to solve research questions in agriculture and environmental science. And Sherry, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah. My research focuses on disaster impact analysis. So today I would like to introduce how we use GIS to estimate the damage and losses of agricultural production caused by tropical cyclones in Florida, and also how we use WebGIS technology to disseminate the results to stakeholders and the public. So as we know, Florida's agriculture is very important to the state's economy, and also it's very important to the food supply of the nation. But Florida has a very unique and challenging landscape for farming due to many factors like its geographical locations. It is particularly vulnerable to tropical cyclones and hurricanes. And also it is surrounded by water on three sides, which makes it also vulnerable to storm surge and flooding. And these extreme weather events can cause devastating damage to agriculture. And also Florida also faces other stressors like environmental challenges and economic and market pressures. And those can also impact the stability and the productivity of agriculture. Today, I will focus on how GIS can help us understand the stressor of natural disasters. And Dr. Lindsay will introduce other stressors after me. So first, I would like to show you these numbers to understand the tropical cyclones in Florida. Since 1850, Florida has experienced 277 tropical cyclones. And all of Florida's coastline has been impacted by at least one hurricane. And between 1980 to 2024, Florida has experienced 66 tropical cyclones, and 32 of them have overall damage and costs that reached or exceeded $1 billion. And the upper left figure, you can see these figures are from the $1 billion Weather and Climate Disaster Database from NOAA. So you can see from the figure that 93% of the economic losses were caused by tropical cyclones in Florida. And the below map shows the cost per year of tropical cyclones in each state of the United States. And Florida is one of the top states. There are like $5 to $10 billion worth of losses every year caused by tropical cyclone. Next page, please. So, So how tropical cyclones impact agriculture? So tropical cyclones always come with high-speed wind, and sometimes it also brings heavy rainfall and causes flooding. And these extreme weather conditions can cause considerable damage and losses, not just to the crops, but also to livestock, aquaculture, fisheries, and the forestry sectors. So it can cause direct damages to crops and reduce the production. It can injure or kill animals. It can also destroy agricultural infrastructure like buildings, machinery, and equipment. So to mitigate these impacts, we need effective disaster management strategies for agriculture industry. Next page, please. Yeah. So how can GIS help the disaster management? Just give some like a basic introduction on GIS. GIS is Geographic Information System. So it is a system used for gathering, managing, analyzing, and visualizing geospatial data. So geospatial data is a data has a geographic component to it, like it is related to a location. So actually, GIS can support all phases of disaster management, from preparation to mitigation, and to response and recovery. So for example, in preparation, GIS can help identify areas that are most at risk. And like during the event, GIS can help track the real-time progress of the event and help us locate the people who need help. And after the event, GIS can support us to quickly assess the damage and the losses. And also it can support developing effective recovery plans and monitoring the recovery progress. And also in every phase, GIS can be used as an effective tool for communication. So now I will take Hurricane Ian as an example to show how we use GIS for the damage and loss assessment and the communication part. Yeah, next page. Yeah. So this is a workflow we use to estimate agricultural damage and losses caused by tropical cyclone. You can say it contains 3 groups of data. First is event data, tells us when, where, and what happened. The second is agriculture baseline data, which is current conditions of the agriculture industry when the event happened. So for Florida, we have developed a group of the data sets on the agriculture industry, including the distribution and acreage of different agriculture commodities, and the distribution and number of different farm infrastructure. And also, we also have information on the crop growing stages. This information is very important because it allows us to understand the growing stage when the event happened. Because the extent of the losses for especially for crops is highly dependent on the growth stage. For example, if the crop is in harvest, it may result in the most economic losses. But if the crop was like just planted or in the early vegetative stage, farmers can like replant them to minimize the losses. And also we have developed the value per acre of different agriculture commodities. So the third part of data is a loss percentage. This part of data is from the surveys and the reports. We disseminate a survey right after each hurricane event to collect information from farmers on what damage and losses they have experienced. All this information we will to put them together to estimate the total damage and losses caused by the event. Next page, please. So yeah, this is a background of Hurricane Ian. So Hurricane Ian happened in 2022 September, end of September. So it is a Category 4 storm. It comes with high winds, devastating storm surge, extreme precipitation, and causes major flooding in many areas. Next page, please. So right after Hurricane Ian, so we have collected the event data of Ian, including the wind speed zones from National Hurricane Center and the precipitation data, which is the rainfall data 3 days before and 3 days after the event from National Weather Service. And also we collected a flood map data showing the flood depths caused by Hurricane Ian from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. So after we got the event data, we can understand like in each agriculture parcel, what level of wind, rainfall, and flood what happened. Next page, please. Yeah, this part is showing what we have done following the workflow. So we overlap the event data with the agriculture land data. So the left part is the agriculture land data distribution in Florida. You can see it contains like more than 10 different agriculture commodity group. Actually, the database contains more detailed information covering like more than 100 different types of commodity in Florida. So when we overlap the agriculture land data with the event data, we can understand, we get the map on the right side, which shows in each agriculture parcel, we know what kind of agriculture commodity it has, and what level of wind, rainfall, and flood it experienced. And we also know the value per the value based on the value per acre data. And all this information help us to estimate the impacted acreage and the impacted value of agriculture during the Hurricane Ian event. Next page, please. So here is the results from this workflow. This table shows estimated acreage of agricultural lands impacted by Hurricane Ian. You can see the detailed acreage number by different commodity group and by different hurricane composite intensity index. This hurricane composite intensity index is an index we developed to represent the composite effects of wind, rainfall, and flood during the hurricane event. The bigger number of events, the higher intensity. So all these acreage, we first exclude all the out of season crops. So you can see about 4 million acreage of agricultural land were impacted by Hurricane Ian. Next page, please. Yeah, so because we have the value per acre data and we have the acreage data, so we combine these two data, we got the annual value of production by different commodity group and by different hurricane composite intensity index. So this is the total value of the agriculture commodity were impacted. It's like the value before the event is around $8 billion. Next page. So then because we have the event data, we understand what happened in different agricultural parcel, and we have a survey data tells us what personal loss each county has experienced. And also we integrate other data from our formal analysis. So we got this personal losses table for different commodity group and different hurricane composite intensity index. Next page. So in this way, we have the value of other commodity group, and we have the personal loss. Then we got this agriculture production losses by commodity group and by hurricane composite intensity index. You can see in the end around $1 billion agricultural production losses caused by Hurricane Ian. Next page. Oh, I think the next one. Next one, yeah. So here is a map showing the losses in each county of Florida. In this way, you can clearly see which county experienced the highest losses during the Hurricane Ian event. And also, so if you are interested in to learn more about the detailed method behind this process, we have a upcoming online course hosted on Pi Center, Pi Academy. I will paste the link in the chat box. So you can learn more information on how we use GIS to assess these losses. Next page, please. So the last page, I will talk about how we use WebGIS technology to communicate these results. So we have developed a web page using ArcGIS online software to show the information and the results we have learned from Hurricane Ian. Actually, this link is open to public. So this page, the unique part of this page is it includes this kind of interactive web map. So user can zoom in, zoom out to see the detailed information data, like this one showing the green part is the agriculture land, and the yellow red part is the wind speed. We also have other interactive maps on this web page showing the precipitation the rainfall data and the flooding data. Yeah, I think that's all. Yeah, next, Dr. Lindsay will talk about other ag stressors. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. That was very interesting. And I believe Dr. Lindsay is with us now. And she is the assistant professor with the University of Florida Department of Family, Youth, and Community Sciences. She is a lead faculty member with our UF IFAS Center for Public Issues Education and Agriculture and Natural Resources, which Sherry referred to as our PI Center. That's what we call it. And Angie also leads our Extension Disaster Education Network, and she plays a very important role in helping us to prepare and respond to disasters in our state. So, Dr. Lindsay.
Thanks, Kendra. And so, hi, everyone. I am currently on an Indian reservation in Montana. So I am going to turn my camera off to make sure that my cell phone stays on and that we do have some connection while I go through this. But I apologize that I'm having to do this very remotely. But I'm going to turn my camera off. So I apologize for that. So yeah, very excited to talk about some of the research that we have done looking at identifying ag stressors. And just to give you a little bit of background on this particular project, we definitely were looking at some recent literature, recent research, and past literature as well, including mental health struggles, looking specifically at the agricultural industry and the incidents of suicide that we're seeing within the agricultural communities as well. And then, of course, following 2020, a lot of these mental health issues, especially within these communities and rural communities, we heard a lot about this following the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So we were looking to build upon the existing literature to gather those perceptions and information regarding those farm-related stress from Florida farmers and those working in ag communities or those that work really closely with Florida farmers as well. So next slide. Thank you. So guiding research objectives, again, we were looking for those perceptions, but the focus groups specifically explored those perceptions on the current situation of farming, the stress related to farming, again, wanting to really identify what those stressors were, the knowledge of the farm stress and mental health resources. What were some of the places that they were turning to? If they were turning to places, where could they identify what some of those resources that were out there were? And then delivery methods for reaching farmers. If we wanted to specifically look at developing tools to specifically reach farmers and have a foundation for building these tools, then what are some of the great delivery methods? What is salient with these groups, and what's the best way to get this information to them? So overall, gaining an understanding of those perceptions, experiences, concerns, and information seeking behavior regarding the farm-related stress, and providing that foundation in which to develop those resources and tools. So next slide. Thanks. So the methodology, they were held virtually between December 2022 and February 2nd, 2023. We actually got a couple in over the holidays, which was kind of nice. And several people actually said, well, I was only able to do this because it's the holiday. So sometimes you think, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it during the holidays. And we were able to hold a couple during those kind of weeks when everybody's kind of quiet. People were willing to join in on some virtual focus groups. So we did 6 focus groups total. It definitely was a convenient sample. We looked to our extension agents here in Florida, as well as our ag industry partners and organizations as well, to help us identify folks and for that recruiting as well. Working very closely with our institutional review board, our IRB. Obviously, this is a very sensitive topic. So in talking with folks and recruiting, we let them know that obviously this is a sensitive topic, and we understand sharing these types of information during a focus group may be something that they would rather do independently. We did offer the option for them to interview with us individually. Most people said that they were fine doing the focus group. We didn't have any individual. We had one individual interview, but it wasn't planned that way. Someone joined the focus group and then 2 other people had to leave early. So we ended up having kind of a one-on-one focus group with somebody. We did offer a monetary incentive, and we had 23 individuals overall, including 19 females and 4 males. Next slide. Thanks so much. Continuing on looking at the methodology, self-reported roles included 19 stakeholders, 3 farmers, and 4 part-time farmers. Obviously, that adds up to more than 23. So several people reported that they had 2 of these roles. A lot of folks reported that they were stakeholders. They worked very closely with several different farmers, but then they were also part-time farmers themselves as well. The moderator guide, was adapted from Mississippi State University. At the conclusion of each of our focus group, we did member checking, and then data was analyzed using a constant and comparison method, and themes were identified, which I'll get into in just a second. Thanks so much. Key findings. So themes are categorized into the following categories. So we had categories that we put these themes into, including the stressors impacting farmer communities. Again, that was one of our objectives. So this was really crucial for us to get this information as well. And those controllable stresses versus uncontrollable stressors. We were curious to find out like what stressors did they feel like were able to be controlled and which ones they were not. Also looking at coping mechanisms and strategies as well, and looking at the healthy versus unhealthy ones. Delivery methods for mental health training and education. What were some of those best delivery methods that they think would be the best way to reach this particular population? Barriers to access mental health resources, training for those who work closely with the farming communities. We did some mental health messages. We did some testing of some messages as well. And then visibility of current mental health. And lastly, but certainly not least, of some ways in which we could overcome some of the barriers that they have identified and the barriers to access mental health resources as well. So some of the key findings, specifically looking at some of those stressors impacting farmer communities. And you'll see here that here's a list or a cloud of some of those that they identified, those stressors that were impacting those farmer communities. I'm sure none of these come as a surprise. Obviously, the pandemic is there in the middle, COVID, workload, aging, climate, production, growth, chain, development practices, constraints physically, the weather, pest, supply, increased regulations, diversity, current diversity, as well as population. So there was definitely some stressors identified that we weren't surprised about at all, and some that we were glad that we were able to gather this information as well. So next slide. And talking about, those that were controllable versus uncontrollable, for the most part, these groups actually said that these were uncontrollable, that a lot of them were controllable. But we had a couple of folks that said, some of them could be more controllable. And when we initially asked the question, the folks immediately answered, oh, they're uncontrollable. And then as we started going through the discussion a bit, there was some more discussion regarding how some of them could be controllable, but some of them thinking about like regulatory changes and changes within the actual industry. This quote kind of shows that controllable is at such a high level, like a governmental level or government intervention, legislative or rulemaking, to make those changes. And sometimes it's harder to make those changes at those higher levels. And so we like this quote, particularly looking at imports and things like that. They're saying it's controllable, but as one person, you don't have the influence or the power to have control. So thinking about control or uncontrollable, some of them felt like that they were powerless in having some of the control of some of the things that they identified as stressors as well. I like the last part of this is, in a perfect world, it's controllable, but as an individual, you don't have the ability, you don't feel like it anyway, to have that control. So thinking about that, they're kind of powerless against some of that. Next slide. And then coping mechanisms was a really great conversation that several folks were involved in as well. And I just took a couple of quotes that showed some of the healthy coping mechanisms and some of the unhealthy as well. There was a lot of positivity in this discussion, including that sense of solidarity and that really leaning on each other, leaning on your family and your friends and others that you work with as well. Looking at that first quote in that first column there's a sense of solidarity and a team where we have three of us that are making decisions together. It's not just me staying awake at night trying to think about through these things. It's the three of us. So really relying on each other and coming together was one of the things that they really said was a positive source of coping through some of this. That's been a big strategy for reducing stress and making farming a more sustainable endeavor for me as I get older. So really relying on others. Faith was also mentioned, as you can see the quote there in that second column there. I think a lot of it, faith comes into play. Faith was definitely something that folks reported on as a positive coping mechanism as well. But then we did get into some of the unhealthy ones, as you can see in column 3. If I developed an affinity for bourbon. So, but he said, I joke on that I do think it's one of those things when you start talking about coping mechanisms, this is where I think the farmer is always the strong one, the one that has the plan. And so there's a lot of quiet depression that goes on. And that quiet depression really stuck with us of that folks may not realize what these folks are going through individually, that there really may be some quiet depression and some silent suffering that perhaps outward folks, including family, may not know what they're going through as well. And so continuing on with some of that discussion, I think a lot of people, especially now that we're out of the trenches of COVID, are using humor as a mild way to cope with some of the issues that we've seen. I think it's just a way of trying to look at it from a lighthearted perspective of how everything's changed. And then the last column here on the right, I think, was very telling in the fact that sometimes you may not know what folks are going through. And this one kind of shows that. If I'm sure there probably is, meaning that I'm sure there's probably is folks that are going through some unhealthy strategies to cope. But I think that's one thing about the agricultural community. Sometimes we don't talk about our problems as much as we should. We bury them and we hide them. I don't think that would be something that a lot of people would be admit to, especially in our industry, the ag industry. If there are a lot of people doing it, they may be walking around normal because they're used to doing it and you would never know. So again, coming back to that quiet depression and silent suffering that we talked about earlier as well. So. Okay, next slide. Trainings and resources. We talked about some of the trainings and resources. They should be diverse and tailored to specific audiences. Website, they suggested a website or an app accessed via the smartphone. Face-to-face conversations and meet farmers where they're at. This was something that was very important to them, looking at industry meetings and places where farmers may be, of bringing some of these resources and some of this information to them where they're already going to be. And this including messages at some of those industry meetings, trainings, regular events and meetings, places that we know that farmers are going to be. Specific quotes from this particular area. I think too, maybe using existing associations and organizations might be a good way. It may actually spark conversations between farmers when they're together and can share experiences. When they're having conversations with each other, just to share those experiences and coping mechanisms, I think it might just generate the conversation. I think this also goes back to the slide previous where we talked about some of those coping mechanisms, relying on the networks, relying on the family and friends and those that they work with as well. So we know that some of these are positive coping mechanisms, and using those networks and those abilities for folks to be able to come together would be positive in sharing some of the trainings and resources. It's not necessarily, oh, sorry, can you go? I was going to read that last quote. It's not necessarily always just a phone call from someone, but a phone call from someone that you have people in common with. And so again, going back to that network and community. So thank you. Key findings in looking at messages and visibility of current resources. Many had a hard time recalling messages and visibility of current resources when asked. Several mentioned programs in other states, including some hotlines and some other programs that were available in other states that they were familiar with. Individual programs that were mentioned specifically within Florida, including Mind Your Melon, which is Marshall Sewell's nonprofit organization, and then Farm State of Mind by the American Farm Bureau. Thank you. And just, I pulled this quote, two of these quotes out. It's just difficult to actually identify what those resources are. Then if you actually do track them down or find them, having them be made readily available, I think it's another hurdle. I would say when this topic has come up in the past, I usually start at the Farm State of Mind campaign with American Farm Bureau, but maybe a landing page or a starting point, because they do have some very basic resources. And then say within agricultural specifically, I think it's difficult to find what those outlets or what those resources are outside of just hotlines or outside of some sort of call-in type resource. One of the things we also heard with these groups is that it would be great to have folks and resources that specifically tailored to the industry, developed and folks that they could talk to that were familiar with the stressors of the agricultural industry and could basically talk to some of that as well. So that having some of that content and context specific people that could be able to identify and know some of the stressors that these farmers are going through would be beneficial. So looking at barriers and overcoming barriers, and I always think this is very interesting to find, especially looking in focus groups of how people identify those barriers and suggestions and overcoming some of those barriers. So mental professionals, I just mentioned that mental health professionals that do not understand the complex stressors and struggles of farming and therefore cannot relate. Farmers are less likely to share their mental health struggles. Again, keep it internal and some of that silent suffering and quiet depression that we talked about a few minutes ago. Farmers typically do not ask for help. We do know that. And then there's definitely some generational barriers. Older populations would be less likely to acknowledge mental health needs, and maybe some of the younger population would be more apt to seek out that help and resources as well. Then rural areas, access to resources, connectivity, some of the logistics and reaching out to some of these resources. The stigma of mental health problems, the stigma of seeing a therapist, and again, some of that quiet depression, silent suffering. Accessibility, do not know how or where to look for resources. Again, when we asked them to name some particular ones, many were not able to do so. And the misunderstanding of therapy or what happens at a therapist appointment. I think there is a stigma, and then therefore folks think, oh, I'm not going to talk to somebody I don't know. There was some talk in a couple of the focus groups about, especially going back to the point about the coping mechanism being with faith, of speaking with a minister or speaking with someone that leads their church, someone, a trusted source in their faith or in their church, that that could be a possibility of overcoming that particular barrier as well. And again, overcoming barriers, reducing the stigma, that's going to take a lot of time. We know that. That's going to take a lot of time and education, and the reputation of it's not a bad thing to go see a therapist, to go talk with somebody or reach out to someone regarding some mental health struggles. But again, that's going to take time to change. And then also that it's accepted and respected that you reached out to identify those resources and to talk about the mental health aspects, and then work to make it top of mind. A lot of folks talked about that, all communication, all those meetings, to keep talking about it. And the more that we keep talking about it in these areas where there are farmers and farmers are there for meetings and things like that, to constantly bring it up. And the more that we continue to constantly bring it up, it brings awareness. And hopefully, going back to that first point on this slide here, the more that we bring awareness in the longer period of time, we hopefully can reduce that stigma as well. And then that education, I really like this quote. I'd say education, not just for farmers, but for their support systems. Again, we saw that one of the coping mechanisms was relying on those family and friends and that network. So making sure that the families and that those support systems, that there's not a negative connotation to try to have better mental health. So in addition to having those messages to farmers themselves, looking at the support systems that these particular groups have, and making sure that we're getting the education and the resources to them as well. That if you need something, to ask for help, I think that as a society, we really need to move in that direction, that we are supportive. So thank you very much. And again, I apologize that I'm having to do this while standing outside.
We thank you for joining us, Angie. We really appreciated that presentation. Our state team experienced a lot of barriers just in even trying to hold those focus groups. We didn't intend to originally have them during the holiday season, but it was an active hurricane season that year, and we talked a lot about whether or not it was even a good idea to proceed. Angie, do you want to talk about that while I look at in the chat and see if there's any questions?
Sure. Yeah, it was a very, very busy hurricane season, as Sherry talked about Hurricane Ian. So it set us back, and we really did kind of falter of like, do we wait till January? What do we do? And we went ahead and started them. And I will say, I do feel like that we had a lot of folks that appreciated the kind of downtime, that they were able to join those virtual focus groups. So we offered several different options that went leading up to Christmas, leading up to December 25th, but then some that were obviously after kind of January. So we were offered a lot of different ways in which folks could join us. So, but I was pleasantly pleased that we did have some folks that were able to join us right there before Christmas and during the holidays as well.
Through our SAGE funding, we've worked really hard to bring mental health first aid and a QPR, question, persuade, and refer suicide prevention training to our county and state faculty throughout the state, so that they would be able to recognize and respond appropriately to, anybody that might have a mental health crisis. I really believe that extension agents need to be trained in these kinds of programs, since we are the boots on the ground and we're in the communities at the time, whether it's a weather-related crisis or, whatever other kind of crisis a farmer may be experiencing. So we're working really hard through our SAGE funding to be able to train not only our community members, but also our extension faculty. And I wasn't seeing any other questions. Sherry did post the link to the Pi Center in the chat box, and to our GIS page as well.
And I have a few questions actually for the panelists if they're up for it.
Sure.
Yeah. My first question is for Sherry. I was wondering, what do y'all think is driving the distinctions between like crops and livestock in terms of like the damage to acreage? Because like, for instance, animals had a really high amount of acreage, and I believe most of that was in grazing land. So I was just wondering what y'all saw in the data.
Yeah, good question. So actually for the livestock, we didn't use the acreage data. Actually, we used the USDA agriculture and the census data to get the number in each county, and we will use a survey to get the personal loss on the livestock part, because livestock is not like crops. Like they didn't distribute evenly. So that's why we didn't use the acreage data for that part. Yeah.
Okay. And is there any other distinctions in terms of the way that acreage was damaged for crops?
What do you mean? The distinguished? Can you?
Well, Krista is responded that the heterogeneity, and I am so bad with that word, is in large part, though not fully, due to value per acre for crops, is the response. So basically, my question was, there seems to be a differentiation between crops. Why do y'all see that there? So thank you, Sherry. And then kind of for both of the panelists, I was wondering what y'all see as the way that these two presentations move together. If y'all could discuss kind of the relationship between the disaster and the stress components as Angie fights the wind. No.
Sorry, I do hope y'all aren't hearing this in my headphones. I tried to do the block the stuff, so I apologize. That's a really great question, Andy. And the reason it's a great question is because myself and Sherry and Dr. Court actually put in a rapid response grant following Hurricane Ian to really look at that very question of what are the stressors and what does recovery look like in these areas that have been heavily impacted by these particular type storms, and heavily impacted, who've been heavily economically impacted, like Sherry just showed us. So what are those mental health impacts specifically, and what are the resources that they may need going into recovery? We know recovery takes a long time, and because recovery can take a long time, those mental health issues can linger. And so therefore, trying to understand that has been part of this additional project. So so we hope to have some results to share with you from that project very soon. So, and then Hurricane Idalia hit. So we also are looking at the data from Hurricane Idalia as well and overlapping it as that also.
One of the things that I've learned from Dr. Sherry and Dr. Court when they have presented to our Florida grant team and to our Florida stakeholders working in this area is how they can overlay the data of areas that have been affected by weather-related incidents. And then we can see the areas that have been chronically hit and know that they might need additional resources for mental health or financial, that kind of thing. So we can kind of specifically target those areas, knowing that they are at high risk.
Well, thank you all very much for all of those responses. I don't see any other questions in the chat at this time. So I would just like to bring this to an end, unless y'all have any other further comments y'all would like to add. If not, then we really appreciate all of the work that y'all do in supporting farmers, ranchers, and farm workers, and the capacity building in the state of Florida, and your participation in the Southern Ag Exchange Network and in this webinar specifically. Thank y'all also to the interpreters and to the attendees for coming today. If you would like to share out this webinar, the recording, both the English and the Spanish tracks will be on the Southern Ag Exchange Network website. That usually takes us a week or two, but just follow up and you can share that link out. And I hope you all have a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody.